Most self-help advice is basically the same idea. When things get hard, you need more willpower, more hustle, more grit. But what happens when the engine just stops? What happens when you're standing in the middle of your life, your job, your marriage, your biggest project, and suddenly you realize you have no idea why you're doing any of it? We call it a breakdown, and we treat it like something has gone wrong. But about 3,000 years ago, one of the most philosophical texts ever written said something very different, that this breakdown is not a failure. It's the beginning of clarity. Today we're looking at why Krishna chose a man having a full psychological breakdown on a battlefield, and why the Greeks looked at the same human crisis with a tragic lens. The Bhagavad Gita doesn't start with wisdom, it starts with a mental breakdown. Arjuna is the greatest warrior of his time. The man is built for victory and he's been preparing for this war his entire life. But when he looks at the army in front of him, he sees his teachers, his cousins, his friends, and suddenly his mind just gives up on him. His bow slips from his hand, his skin burns, and he starts to shake. And strangely, that's the reason Krishna chooses Arjuna. Not because he's perfect, but because he's completely honest in these moments. Now compare this to the Greek hero Achilles. When Achilles found himself in a similar situation, his honor is insulted, so he withdraws in anger from the war. He sits in a tent while the battle continues, and ironically, by removing himself, he becomes responsible for even more deaths. Arjuna faces the same problem. He must defend justice, but doing that means killing the people he loves. Two legitimate duties, one impossible decision. The difference is that Arjuna admits something that Achilles is too proud to admit. He admits to not knowing. He says, I don't know what is right. That moment is the most important, because it's impossible to teach a mind that thinks it already knows everything. And Krishna doesn't speak immediately, he waits. He waits for Arjuna's confidence to shatter. If you think this is religious philosophy, it's really not. The importance of not knowing was important in Greece as well. Socrates, the Greek philosopher, had a strange habit. He would walk up to confident people, generals, politicians, experts, and ask them simple questions. What is courage, for example? They would give a very confident answer, and Socrates would question it, then question the next part, and then question the person again, until eventually the person would just stand there, realizing that they had no idea what they were talking about. This is known as the Socratic paradox. Socrates claimed that he was wiser than others for a reason. He knew that he did not know, and that moment of confusion has a name in philosophy. It's called aporia. It's the point where your old ideas stop working completely and the new ones haven't appeared yet. And that is exactly where Arjuna is standing at the start of the Gita. Krishna doesn't begin with advice. He lets Arjuna reach aporia first. Because if your mind is already full of answers, nothing new can enter. Eventually, Arjuna asks for a deeper truth. And Krishna gives him something dramatic, the Vishwarupa, the universal form. Most people think of this as a religious miracle, but psychologically it works like a tool. There's something very similar in Stoic philosophy. It's called the view from above. The Stoics would imagine rising above their city, then above the earth, then above the stars. But why? Because when you see the full scale of reality, your personal drama shrinks. Arjuna's panic came from being too close to the situation. He saw my family, my reputation, my guilt. Krishna zooms him out until Arjuna sees time, death, and existence as a whole. Everybody is afraid of killing and is going to die anyway, including himself. So when you see life from that altitude, action becomes easier. This is the heart of Karma Yoga. Act fully. But don't confuse the outcome with your identity. You can act intensely without being psychologically destroyed by the result. Why does Achilles end in tragedy while Arjuna's story ends in action? The difference is identity. The philosopher Bernard Williams argued that the Greek heroes lived inside a culture of shame. Their sense of self depended on reputation, on basically how others saw them. When Achilles feels dishonored, his ego doesn't break, it intensifies. His pride traps him. Arjuna does something much harder. Because he wants the answer to his dilemma so badly, he lets go of reputation and ego. He's willing to look weak. He's willing to look like a coward. And that's where the Gita takes place, on a battlefield and not a monastery. It's not a philosophy for people who run away from the world. It's for people with responsibilities and for people who have to act even when they don't feel ready. I'm sure that sounds familiar. So here's the thing. If you're waiting for motivation to act, you will go on waiting. Arjuna didn't get motivated. He realized that he didn't control the outcome of the war. He only controlled how clearly he could act inside it. You might not be failing. You might just be standing at the beginning of the first chapter of something meaningful.